Okay, students, we're going to go through chapter 2 together. I'm going to show you what I'm expecting for the reader's notes. Okay, hoping this makes things a little easier for you. Okay, before we get started, let's just review. In chapter 1, we met Lyddie and her family. They live out in a cabin in the woods. A bear came into their cabin. Nobody got hurt because they were up in the loft, but after the bear left, the mother was full of fear and felt like it was a sign that the world was going to end. So she decided they all had to leave and go to her sister's. Lyddie talked her into letting her and her brother Charlie stay to take care of the farm. So they've been at the cabin throughout the winter by themselves, and at the end of chapter 1 they get a letter from the mother saying that she's rented the farm and gotten both of them jobs to help pay the debts. The debts are money that their family owes. And in her letter she said, "We can still hop." This made the kids laugh because what she really meant is we can still hope, but for them it was like we can still hop. We still can do something. Okay, chapter 2 starts with Lyddie and Charlie making some decisions and getting ready to leave the cabin. Now, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to pause this and read the first few pages of chapter 2. But as you're reading, what you're looking for here is anything that tells you setting, characters, and plot refers to events, what happens, okay? And then at the bottom of page 11, top of page 12, we're going to get the answer to this question: what happened to Lyddie and Charlie's father? How does that affect their plans? Okay. We'll also be looking at these vocabulary words, especially transaction and gaping. We won't see that until our second reading, but you can see here, this is still blank. So we're going to figure out the meaning from the context. All right, I want you to pause right now, and I want you to read pages 10, 11, and the first paragraph of page 12. You can use the audio recording, the audio recording that I posted on Schoology. If you don't know where that is, please raise your hand or ask somebody at your table. And you need to have your chapter 2 text. If you don't have a copy of chapter 2, please see a teacher and get a copy of that. Okay. I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, you're back. So you should have read pages 10, 11, and the first paragraph of 12. So the first thing we're going to do is fill in setting. Okay, what'd you get for setting? All right, they're still at the cabin. Okay, and who are the characters? And this is really easy. We only have so far Lyddie and who? Yeah, that's right, Charlie. Okay, and what's happened? Well, that's all that's happened. They've talked about selling the calf, and Lyddie's decided the calf doesn't belong to her mother, so they're going to keep the money. Okay, talked about selling the calf. She feels a little bit resentful that they have to go to work. Okay, all right. Now, what did you find here about the dad? Let's look at the bottom of page 11, top of page 12. Okay, we're going to read this part together, okay? So, page 11, last paragraph. Please follow along on your text. They cleaned the cabin and swept out the splintery plank floor. They knew it was a rough and homely place compared to the farmhouses along the road and the ample mansions around the village green. But their father, the seventh son of a poor Connecticut Valley farmer, had bought the land and built the cabin with his own hands before their birth, promising every year to sell enough maple sugar or oats or potash to build a larger, proper house with a real barn attached instead of a shed, which must be found through rain or blizzard. Okay, a lot of things happening here. First of all, we find out their father's been poor for a long time, and he did buy the land, and where did he get the money? He built the house himself, or the cabin, really. It's not even a house. That makes it really personal. And then when it says promising every year, That basically it means he was planning. He was planning to sell things to make money to build a house. Okay, that was his plan. So he planned to make money to build a better house. But there was a problem, wasn't there? A series of problems. Okay, continuing to read. Bottom of page 11. Please follow along. His sugar bush was scraggly. What do you think that means? Yeah, scraggly means it was not very healthy. It did not produce enough sugar for him to sell. And his oat crop, barely enough to feed his growing family. So he grew oats, but what happened to all the oats? Yeah, that's right. They ate it. They didn't have enough to eat and have extra to sell. And then it says, there were stumps to burn aplenty as he cleared the land, but suddenly there was no need for potash in England and hardly any demand in Vermont. So he was planning on selling the ashes that were left from burning his stumps. I think they used potash for like a fertilizer or something. But what happened? They didn't need any. Hardly any demand means he couldn't sell it because nobody wanted to buy it. And then it says, this sentence I'd like you to highlight on your copy of this text. He borrowed heavily to buy himself 3 sheep. He borrowed heavily. What does that mean? Yeah, he borrowed money to buy some sheep. So now he has a big debt. So he borrowed a lot of money to buy 3 sheep. What was he going to do with the 3 sheep? Yeah, he wanted to sell the wool. Okay? Now, you see that comma there? He borrowed heavily to buy himself 3 sheep, comma. Now we could put a but here. And the bottom dropped out of the wool market the very year he had had enough wool to think of it as a cash crop. So basically, once he had enough wool to sell, that's right, the price dropped. And then highlight this sentence. This is going to be my text evidence. He was an unlucky man. Okay, everything he tried to do didn't work out. Even his children sensed that, but he loved them and worked hard for them, and they loved him fiercely in return. So their father worked very hard, but everything he tried didn't work out. But this is really important right here, students, is that he borrowed a lot of money. Now, how does that affect Lyddie and Charlie? Okay, think about it. What does somebody have to do when they owe money? Yeah, they have to pay it back, but where are they going to get the money? Yes, they have to get a job. And so even though they're children, their mother has decided that Lyddie and Charlie have to work to make money to pay their father's debts, the money that he owes. Okay? That's pretty sad. I bet their father would feel terrible if he knew this was happening. Okay, now, students, I want you to pause again, and this time I want you to read to the end of the chapter. Now, while you're reading, you're looking for a few things, okay? Number 1, you're looking for the setting. Now we're looking at, in addition to the place, we're also looking for the time. We're going to figure out exactly when this is happening. And we also have some new characters we're going to add in here, okay? And then what happens. And then we're going to answer this question. Name 2 ways the Stevens family helps Lyddie and Charlie. And finally, we're going to look at the word transaction and gaping. Okay? So again, setting, when is this happening? Who else is in the story in chapter 2? What happens? What are the events? How do the neighbors, the Stevens, help them? And then we're looking at transaction and gaping. I know that's a lot to do, so take your time. I want you to pause I want you to read the text. Go ahead and write on. We gave you these copies so you can write on it and annotate. You can use the audio to listen. Students, don't worry if you don't understand every little bit. We're going to go over this together, and I'm going to help you to find ways to isolate the text that answers your questions. Okay? All right, do your best, and when you come back, I'll walk you through it. Okay. You shouldn't be listening here unless you've gone back and read the text, because I'm not going to read all of this. You should have read from page 12 to the end of the chapter. If you didn't do that, then pause me right now and go back and do that. Okay, now we're going to pick up on page 14. Actually, first of all, where are they? They don't stay at the cabin. Where do they go? Yeah, that's right. They go to the Stevens house, their neighbors. And eventually, Charlie gets left off at the factory, and Lyddie gets dropped off at the tavern where she's going to be working. But the main setting place here is the Stevens house, okay? What time is this? Did anyone find that? Yeah, okay, page 12. If you didn't find it, pause and look at the bottom of page 12. Okay, for those of you who found it, yes, that's right, it's May. It was the end of May, and it also says, you might have found the words, it's spring, okay? So that's our time. Now, how long have they been in that cabin alone? Yeah, since November. 6 months, those two kids, 13 and 10 years old, all through the winter, been at their farm. Okay, and who are the characters? Yeah, that's right, the Stevens. So we have Mr. Stevens. Mrs. Stevens is mentioned briefly, but the other important Stevens is Luke, because he's the one who gave him a ride. Okay? So what are the events? When they first got to Stevens' house, this is one of the first things, actually, the way the Stevens helps. So they talk to Mr. Stevens, tells them they've been alone there all winter. He feels a little bit bad about that. He's been alone all winter, just the two children. And then he says, I should have come to call on my neighbors. So you can see here, he's feeling guilty. He didn't know the kids were alone, and he didn't help them through the winter. Now I'm on page 14. So what do? Yeah, they sell the calf to Mr. Stevens. Okay, this connects to the ways the Stevens family helps them. Now, it's one thing just to buy a calf, but there's something special about this purchase. Yeah, he bought the calf for a really high price, $25. So Mr. Stevens, so the event was that he bought the calf. They sold the calf, okay? But the way he helped them was he bought it for a high price. And they knew he was doing that to help them, okay? So that's on page 14. Now, this is where we see the word transaction, by the way. See that word transaction? On the first sentence of the last paragraph on page 14. Let's read that together. He invited them into their house, to complete their business transaction. And before they were done, they found themselves eating a hearty dinner with the family. Okay, what do you think transaction means? It says to complete their business transaction. Yeah, okay, it's like a deal, okay, to finish their deal. So they agreed on a price, and they went in to get their money. So it's all about buying and selling. Okay, it's a business deal. So transaction can mean deal. All right. So they go in the house. Now, what's the next thing they did? Yeah, they fed them. It says dinner, so it's like a big meal that they eat at lunchtime. It says the noon dinner. It's like a really big meal. And this was really nice for the kids because they hadn't been eating very well. Okay, and then looking at the top of page 15. Okay, look at the top of page 15. The Quaker's wife was as large and red-faced as her husband, and equally kind. She urged them to eat, for they still had a long walk ahead of them. So you can just imagine they're sitting around the table and she's like, come on, eat more. You still have a long walk ahead of you. And then back to the text. This reminded Quaker Stevens, that's Mr. Stevens, that he needed nails. Okay, why does this remind him he needs nails? Well, let's keep reading. One of the boys could take them to the mill and then on to the village, he said. So he's sitting there thinking about this long walk. Remember, he's a really nice guy, okay? And he's thinking about these poor little kids, 13 and 10 years old, and they have to walk, probably take them an hour or two into town. And he's already feeling guilty. He didn't know they were there alone all winter. So he's like, I need nails. Okay, do you think he really needs nails? No, he's just looking for a reason to go into town so he can give them a ride. So he gives them a ride. Now, does he do it himself? No, he has his son, Luke. All right, so Luke gives him a ride into town. And now we're going to go on to the last couple pages here. Now, Luke makes an offer to help in two different ways. So if you haven't found those, I want you to look, pause, go to page 16, about the middle of page 16, look for the first thing he offers to do to help. And then look at the bottom of page 17 to see the second thing he offers to do that would be helpful. All right, so just pause and go look. Okay, in the middle of page 16, Charlie was worried about the snow on top of the cabin. He was very concerned. Okay, it says, I hope the snow don't do in the roofs. I hope, what that means is I hope the snow doesn't make the roof collapse or fall. And Lyddie was, feeling really bad that he was so worried. She said, oh, they'll be all right, and we'll be back in a couple of years. But then Luke says, I could stop by. Would thee like me to stop by, shovel the snow off the roof if need be? So that's the first thing he offers. What does he offer to do? Yeah, clean the snow off the roof. So it's actually, he hasn't done it yet. He offers to clean the snow off the roof. Okay, what's his second offer on the bottom of page 17? They've dropped off Charlie at the factory, and he can see that she's really worried about him. Okay, did you find it? All right, he says, okay, he grinned. I hope to see thee before too much time is up, he said. Meantime, I'll see to thy house. So he's already promised to look after their house. But here's the second thing. He leaned over the seat. I'll give a look in on thy Charlie too, he said. So he has promised to look in on Charlie. Now, why would he do that? What does that mean, to look in on? Yeah, to check on him, to see if he's okay. Because he can see that Lyddie's worried. Remember, Charlie's only 10, and she's been like a mother to him. And so he said, he would take a look, and because he knows that she's not going to be able to go check on him very much. Okay? Now, students, the one last thing we have to do is look at gaping. Okay? I should have done that before. Anyway, the middle of page 17, they're at the factory where Charlie's going to work. Let's read this. Charlie put his little hand on her arm. You mustn't worry, Lyddie, he said. You'll be all right. She nearly laughed. He was trying to comfort her. Or maybe she nearly cried. She watched the gaping mouth of the mill swallow up his small form. He turned in at the immense doorway. It was large enough to drive a high wagon through, and waved. Let's be going, she said. It's late. Okay, let's go back. It says the gaping mouth of the mill. What is that metaphor? The gaping mouth. What is she describing? What is that thing she's looking at? Yeah, the immense doorway. It was large enough to drive a high wagon through. So Charlie's going into this huge door. Now, think about it. Is the door open or closed? What's the image you're getting in your head? Yeah, open. It's a huge open door. Gaping means open. Okay? Now that was not that hard, was it? Figure that out. Okay. The large gaping mouth. Okay, students, that's it. You are done with chapter 2.